So we're going to do introductions. I think a lot of you know Jay here, but we're going to give him a formal introduction. I'm Rick Estrada, and again, I want to welcome everybody for coming here today. phoenixNAP, we always try to keep things interesting for our clients or prospects. And, so what we're going to do today, Jay will then get in and do a blockchain presentation. We're going to do a build a blockchain. I want to thank our sponsor, Intel. Intel stepped up. They are a leader in blockchain technology from collaboration, being on different councils. And when we let them know that we were interested in hosting something like this, they stepped up and helped sponsor some of the marketing efforts and help pay for your lunch today. We have a group of them sitting over here. I want to say thank you very much. We appreciate you guys. I'd like to introduce Jay here.
Thanks, Rick. All right. It's great to be with you today because the whole intention of Desert Blockchain is to build community in this space of decentralized web and blockchain and distributed ledger technology. So you being here today is part of that community building, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be here today. I have been in the blockchain space for going on 4 years now. I come from the telecom background. The telecom industry has wrestled with a key problem since like 1999. So when Larry Page and Sergey Brin were sitting in their dorm room at Stanford wrestling around with search engines, the telecom business was searching for a global solution that's something akin to an alternative to the domain name system. And that still isn't solved. And I saw blockchain and I said, that is the answer. So for about the last 4 years, almost every waking moment of my time has been spent looking at and exploring what the possibilities are on the blockchain. So I'm happy to talk to you today and show you a little bit about maybe what's possible with the blockchain. Why is this achieving such wide interest and so forth? So first of all, how many of you currently hold cryptocurrency? Okay, a few. All right, awesome. Well, then that's perfect. You really, holding cryptocurrency, and Desert Blockchain is designed for the broader applications of blockchain. And we don't spend much time on cryptocurrency, but most people are introduced to the blockchain via cryptocurrency. So what is blockchain and what are some fundamental characteristics? And there's a bunch of different dimensions to blockchain, but I like to keep with sets of threes, that's about all my mind can comprehend. So 3 key elements of blockchain in my view is that it's decentralized, it's transparent, and there is a phenomenon where money and data are merging. And it takes a while to let that sink in, just how money has become part and parcel with the bits, the zeros and the ones. But I assure you that money is, and the financial incentives associated with blockchain are a key element of the whole thing working. So another way to describe it is it's digital gold. It alters our concept of money, and the biggest point, one of the biggest points I'd like to make to you today is that all the blockchains out there, in my view, are prototypes. So 10 years ago when Satoshi Nakamoto published a 9-page white paper, which arguably is one of the most impactful works of human beings ever, in my view, that just kind of cobbled together a few pieces that people had been wrestling with for a long time in a way that made it viable to some degree. But the blockchains that are out there right now are kind of like skateboards or tricycles compared to what they really should be or could be. So cryptocurrency is the first killer application for the blockchain. It's somewhat akin to what email was in the mid-90s, where everybody thought that email and the internet were the same thing. A lot of people think that cryptocurrency and blockchain are the same thing. Well, cryptocurrency is a big deal, but it's just part of the wedge that I think is about to happen. And the applications are much broader than just cryptocurrency. So let's talk about centralized trust. So let's kind of compare what we've had up until this point versus what this blockchain thing is. And I would say that blockchain is an inadequate term for really what's going on. I think that's the common term for this, but it's really doesn't capture what's going on. So when I was growing up, my parents spent a lot of money on a set of books like this. And when I would have a paper due or some sort of project due, I would go to this set of books as the authoritative repository of knowledge. So Britannica, World Book, whatever, they would go out and they would hire PhDs, and they would determine effectively what we all consider to be the truth on various topics. Okay? Now, if you think of centralized trust like that, that is a key part of many of the constructs that we currently use in banking, in insurance, in title, and so forth. We rely upon some sort of centralized authority that we trust to be the definitive source of truth. Okay? Then what happened? Well, then what happened was good old Microsoft came along and said, hey, we don't need this paper and print stuff. We can do something called Encarta. And we can provide again, a centralized, authoritative source of truth online. And it was a big advancement from the old paper books. But then what happened? Well, what happened was we had Wikipedia that came along. Wikipedia is a significantly different construct. It's like a crowdsourced source of truth. And it has arguably an adversarial component to it. Because if I go on and I say something about, I don't know, phoenixNAP, and then Rick sees it and he says, no, that's not true, he can go in and erase it. And there's this whole history that's going on behind the scenes that sort of lets the authoritative, crowdsourced source of truth emerge. And what happened was Wikipedia now has eclipsed Encarta, eclipsed the paper books, and it's this decentralized, not totally decentralized, but it's this decentralized construct source of truth. That, in my view, is one of the best ways to think about blockchain and what's going on in this decentralized web initiative. So, I've peppered this with about 3 questions to look at your situation with your business, okay? Just to kind of bring it home. Number 1, I would ask you to think about where are the centralized trust repositories in your industry? So, in terms of ownership and control, in terms of information, and in terms of service. Because, and by the way, this slide deck is available at desertblockchain.com on the front page, and you're free to use it and do whatever. But the point being is that this blockchain sort of peek at what could be, I assert, could be your company's biggest opportunity and simultaneously your biggest threat. So here are some key questions you can ask yourself as we go through this. And what's an example of that? Well, ask the taxi companies. Because what's happened is, in a very short period of time, the taxi companies have been disrupted via what is effectively kind of a decentralized, although it is centralized, but it's this spread out taxi service that we control through these. okay? And the other component is that, you know, prior to these, if you'd gone back to, you know, 2005, the thought of getting into a stranger's car and having them drive you across town, or me letting a stranger get into my car and driving that stranger across town, that was like, Jay, I think it's time for you to sit down and take a break, because that's a crazy, crazy idea, right? So the point is that trust is a central component of many of the constructs that we rely upon. And if that trust can be ushered in a way that's kind of innovative, all sorts of things can happen that are new and revolutionary. And as Marjan just pointed out, the same thing has happened with housing. So Airbnb, the thought of, wait a second, I'm going to let a stranger sleep 2 doors down the hall in my house overnight, and they're going to pay me for that? Forget it. Or I'm going to sleep in a stranger's house? Prior to this construct of trust, that would have seemed like an insane idea. Okay, and blockchain and this decentralized web construct starts to usher in new realms of this trust that I assert are even more profound and certainly more decentralized than Uber or Airbnb. So part of what Airbnb and Uber were attracted to was the fat margins that they perceived in the taxi industry, the friction, and the timing. If you've used Uber, it's amazing how you pull out your phone, you hit a button, and the next thing you know, your ride is there. And oftentimes the person giving you the ride is doing the best they can to give you the best customer service possible, right? It's amazing. So this is kind of a peek into what might be possible through this decentralized construct we're calling the blockchain. And by the way, many of the startups in the blockchain space are targeting the next generation of Uber and Airbnb. So they're actually in the crosshairs themselves now. So what is your advantage? Or what is the incumbent advantage right now? And I assert that the incumbent advantage for ushering a new realm of opportunity that instead of this being a threat could be a huge opportunity for your incumbent companies is looking at the human side of your industry. What human characteristics are going to be there no matter what? And I assert there are some opportunities in whatever your industry is where focusing on the human side that's not going to be replaced with digits, that is the key opportunity, in my view. So in this situation, and I gave a talk to a real estate school, I said, look, you people that are sitting out here, you know the human side of the real estate business. And I assert there will always be a need for real estate brokers because you know how to read what are the emotional characteristics that are happening in the conversation to buy a piece of real estate. Are you concerned about your mother-in-law living in the, guest house? Are you concerned about the schools? So that is the opportunity. And by the way, this human side is where blockchain and cryptocurrency falls down big time right now. So that's just an example of the human element of business, I think, is going to continue to be at the forefront of this revolution we're calling blockchain and decentralized web and the decentralized construct. So, question 3, what are the essential elements, human factors in your industry in terms of emotion, creativity, and storytelling? And although AI was mentioned earlier, I assert that AI, it's going to be a long time, if ever, when you'll be able to program in emotion into AI. And emotion's a key factor in this whole construct. So, is this reality? Well, in Arizona in particular, we have a group of policymakers that I would say are leading the initiative for a vision in this area. Governor Ducey in, I think, 2015 signed in this bill, which was the first bill in the nation to make a signature on the blockchain, a digitized, cryptographically secured signature, a valid legal signature. And since then, we've had other policymakers that are in Arizona or in Washington, D.C. from Arizona that continue to look at how do we put Arizona at the forefront of this, and at the same time, how do we put in the consumer safeguards? And that's part of what Desert Blockchain is working on, is a innovation set in the policy realm. So, let's build a blockchain. Okay? You guys up for that? And we're going to do it with new times issues. Yes, sir. This is going to be a crowdsourced thing. So you can relax, Rick. I'm going to ask for volunteers to help with this, because part of the dimension of the blockchain is it's crowdsourced from day one. We had an innovator who remained pseudonymous, Satoshi Nakamoto, who basically was able to spark an idea that a worldwide community has taken up and created. I think this morning it was like $300 billion market cap for the top 100 cryptocurrencies. So if you guys are up for it, I'm going to ask for people to step forward and participate in this building of a blockchain. So number one, and what I have here, just so you know, we're gonna consider these new times issues, and these are consecutive weeks, as blocks. Okay? And as I go through this, I'll explain why this is so relevant. Because many of the dimensions of blockchain, in my mind, are akin to freedom of the press. Freedom of the press has changed the dynamic of power, of information, of truth. Okay? So, is there anyone that would help me pass out the first block? Okay, great, Jim. So, the ask is, are there 10 people here that would step up and be nodes? Just pass those out to 10 people. So there's 10 issues. I'm pretty sure that we're all confident that these issues are probably pretty much the same, right? You can get them off at any street corner. If anybody had a question that isn't a node, you could flash through the new times and kind of compare one to another and say, okay, this is just like the other one. Okay? All right, now, who would, out of the 10 nodes, who would be willing to be a miner? We need 5 miners. So Jim, or is somebody else, you got to be a node to be a miner. Are you a node? Do you have a? No, I'm not. You don't have a new times issue? So whoever has a new times issue, we need 5 of you to be, and Jim, would you mind giving them each, tearing off a ticket and giving them a ticket, and then they set like this? Give them a top and a bottom, and then have them give you back either one. Okay. If you have a new times issue and you're a node, you now are eligible to be a miner. Okay? And the miners are going to be the arbiters of truth. Okay? And what's going on right now is we have a permissionless construct that's taking place. Jay is not pointing out who can participate. Jay's kind of leading this. So we got 5 tickets in here? Awesome. So Jay is, there's no central authority that's determining who can be a node and who can be a miner. Okay? So now we're going to do a little raffle, which is like mining. Because the mining and all the conversation you hear about in terms of the electricity expenditure, that's basically skin in the game. And what they're searching for, you can think of it like a big jigsaw puzzle that's got one little missing piece, that if that jigsaw puzzle had that missing piece, it would be a complete puzzle. That's basically what people are in China are, quote, mining to earn. I think it's around $100,000 every 10 minutes. And they're spending a ton of computing power and energy. So, Marjan, will you pick out a number?
045.
045? Okay, cool. So, you, sir, earn $5 reward, and you get to determine the first block, what's in the first block, the Genesis block, by ripping out 2 pages in the New Times and tell everybody which 2 pages. And you can keep those 2 pages. 23
51.
And 51. Okay, now we need somebody to start to build the block on the wall. Is there somebody you will do that? Okay, cool. Go ahead and put that up there. Put a 0 for the start. So 0 is where we start. We're basically a clean slate. That's called the Genesis block. This is block number 1. And you're going to need a little room underneath. What was the first page? 23?
23.
And what's the other page? 23 and 24. So please put 23 and 24 on that one. Just anywhere. And then we're going to put that down below. So you can think of this as like information or transactions that are going to be part of the first block. 51 and 52. And then and what we're doing is we're starting a hash, which is going to be like a fingerprint of the content. Our miner, and all the nodes now should have pages 23 and 51 ripped out and set aside because that's going to be your block. Okay? And what we need to do is basically total up these 2 numbers and these 2 numbers, and whatever the total is, we're going to put here and here. And everybody should be checking this, because here's the thing. You should be treating this like your family's safety is at risk. Because that's really what we're talking about. Imagine that blockchain is being used for not only your financial records, but maybe your health and your legal records. Or more importantly, there's a conversation going on about blockchain being like the air traffic controller, if you will, for autonomous vehicles. So your family, your safety in the autonomous vehicle realm, in the IoT realm, could be hinging upon these types of calculations and the transparency and the crowdsourcing associated with this type of construct. So we got 150. This is basically our hash, okay? So that is a fingerprint. It no longer represents a number. It represents an algorithm, because those numbers now are basically meaningless. They're out of the context of, 23 pages and 51 pages and so forth. It's now creating this compressed fingerprint that if anything in this thing changed, you would instantly know it because the fingerprint would change. So the hash could actually represent the entire content of the Library of Congress. And if so much as one period changed to a comma, the entire hash would change. And that's part of the security and the whole dynamic of this thing. Okay? So we have just, congratulations, we just had a miner that was selected at random, basically, who earned a reward for his efforts. He determined what the content of the blockchain was going to be. You will notice that we have departed from a centralized authority. We are now creating our community-sourced repository of truth. It's no longer in the hands of the management and the company of the New Times. We are creating it as a community. And by the way, everybody, even though you're not a node, is part of this construct. Because if indeed your family's safety was at stake here, anybody who's not holding a New Times could be verifying from node to node if this is actually the source of truth. And the mining reward also signals certain information. Okay? So shall we create our next block? The Bitcoin blockchain has been around for 10 years now. You can look at that like a bounty. If in fact any one of us in this room could compromise the Bitcoin blockchain, we would be able to earn in excess of $100 billion, like that. So every day that the Bitcoin blockchain, and I'm not an advocate of the Bitcoin blockchain, there's plenty of flaws. All I'm saying is that every day that passes where these constructs stay in place is like a curing or a strengthening, a hardening of these constructs. Does that make sense? So let's build block number 2. Jim, you mind passing these out to the nodes, all the nodes?
The same people?
Same people.
Okay.
And each node should have 2 pages set aside which constitutes the information in our blockchain. Kind of glossing over certain things just for the sake of illustration. But your timestamp is constituted by the date that's on each page that we're ripping out. Okay? Does that make sense? And we could actually write that up at the top of the block, but we're going to keep it kind of simple. Okay, so everybody has a, all the nodes should have a newer issue of the New Times. And Marjan, will you?
044.
044? That's you? Okay, cool. So you get the mining reward. And you get to determine the 2 pages that are ripped out of that issue of the New Times. 13, 14? So 27 is a total. And then what's the other page? 65, 66. So this is the part where the chain part is created. Because we're taking the hash from the prior block, the first block that was mined, and we're carrying it forward to the second block. And now we're going to add the hashes from the 2 sets of transactions, 27 and 131. Total that up, and that's going to be the hash of block number 2. And just to be clear, 308. See? It works. So we're taking this, we're taking the 150, and we're putting it over there. And we've had our miner tell us what the content of block number 2 is. And we've created this hash through this very crude hashing mechanism that gives us a fingerprint of not only what's in block number 2, but also carries forward block number 1. So do you see how we've got 10 years in the Bitcoin blockchain of information that's distilled into one 64-character hash? That's a lot of information. Same thing with Ethereum. Does that make sense?
How many years is for Ethereum?
So Ethereum was launched in August of 2015. So we're going into 3 years with it. If I had listened to the little voice in my head and put $2,000 into Ether when it first came out, I would be on the beach right now. Because Ethereum went up to like 1,000, so it was like $5 or $6 million, $2,000 to $5 or $6 million in less than 3 years. This is a real estate town. Phoenix is a real estate town. And not to highlight the cryptocurrency too much, but I challenge any and every real estate speculator to tell me what their wildest home run was in real estate. And whatever their wildest speculation was, whatever they made the most money in the shortest period of time, that's going to look like a certificate of deposit in a savings account compared to what has gone on in cryptocurrency. So a lot of the excitement that you've seen so far has been from what I call the buy low, sell high crowd. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that the amount of people that are really interested in what this technology and this construct can do is very small compared to the amount of excitement and information that's happened. Because people have discovered this as a store of value. And you can think of it like this. I'm a father. If I was a Syrian father standing on the banks of the Mediterranean, getting ready to put my family in a boat to hopefully cross to a new future, what would I rather have? Would I rather have a pocket full of the Syrian currency, or a sack of gold over my shoulder, or even a bag of diamonds in my pocket? Or would I rather have this little hash or a private key? Hands down, private key. And that's part of the stability of this construct, and part of the reason that this is not just a short-term phenomenon. Let's mine our final block. The hash goes one way. It's just basically a simplified way to assure that what you think you have is actually what you have. Okay? So the relationship is that if I think I have a full and uncompromised version of Gone with the Wind, at a glance, I can tell if that Gone with the Wind book, thick book, is authentic or not. And a lot of you folks, I'm guessing, are in, cloud data and security and whatever. That's a key thing to have at your disposal. So let's go ahead and do the third block, and then we can open it up to some more questions and so forth. So the third block is kicked off. We've determined the second block, and now during that time we've got transactions and activity coming in that's being collected, and now we're going to take some of that activity and turn it over to a miner to determine how much of that activity gets sort of solidified into the blockchain. You can think of it as like every day a bank closes its books because it's taken all the transactions that happened during that day, and they say, okay, these are the solid done transactions. Something similar is going on like this, if that makes sense. So it's like the entire world can be submitting transactions, and now we're going to determine which of those transactions are valid and which of them are going to be sort of memorialized within the blockchain. Okay, so every node should now have a copy, and the third copy the third week, which, by the way, is any one of us could go out to pretty much any street corner where the New Times is at, and you could pick up a copy and say, okay, this is, in fact, a valid copy. So, pick another.
Who's going to get the last $5? Yeah. 043.
043. Okay, awesome. There's your mining reward.
Nice.
So please tell us which pages are we going to rip out. 37, 38. Go ahead and everybody rip those out. And go ahead and total those up. 61, 62. Okay, so now all the nodes should have 6 pages. 2 pages from the first block, 2 pages from the second block, and 2 pages from the third block. And anybody that wants to check that should be able to come over to the node and say, okay, you've got a valid blockchain here. So we're carrying forward the hash from block 2, and we're adding to that hash the subhashes from the transactions to create our final hash for block number 3, 506. Perfect. Everybody's validating. So that's it. We have basically created a blockchain using New Times issues and having an entire community participate in creating that. So I follow 3 things, 3 projects, and there are thousands, okay? I've got some backup material in the presentation. You can go to CoinMarketCap and you can see the activity for the top 100 cryptocurrencies. But I can only follow 3 things, which is Bitcoin, Ethereum, and something called the interplanetary file system. And everything else might be, valid and whatever, but those are the 3 that I think have or are pioneering the most fundamental elements in this whole construct. But to your point, in smart contracts, Satoshi Nakamoto and Bitcoin represent a breakthrough in innovation around consensus. So what that 9-page paper did was it solved a consensus problem that had been plaguing computer science and digital currency for a long time through this mining algorithm. Okay? Ethereum, which was written by a fellow named Vitalik Buterin, who was 19 years old at the time, in late 2013 or 14, opened up something called a global computer and created this global construct that can do computation. That was a huge breakthrough. And he overcame something called the halting function or Turing completeness by putting in this financial element of, it's called gas, basically, that if you put in an infinite loop into your logic, it will stop eventually when it runs out of gas or fuel in the Ethereum blockchain. And that was a huge, huge innovation. IPFS is creating what I consider to be a combination of pieces in terms of file storage and file mechanisms. And a lot of projects out there are now combining the logic of Ethereum with the file storage capability of IPFS. So, smart contracts are these logic building blocks where people can create things and everybody basically runs the logic. So when I got into the telecom realm, a telephone call was very distinct from putting a letter in the mail and mailing something. Television was very distinct from radio. They were completely separate. And then this thing called the internet came along, and all of a sudden everything started to get blurred. Well, take that blurring that happened, in the mid-90s to 2000, and expand that in this construct, because now we have technology, business models, and policy all starting to melt together. And the driver is, right now, for the consensus, which is not going to work, is just sort of a prototype, but the driver right now is generally the mining rewards that are happening in the general community. So I have here a coffee rewards card from a place called 32 Shea, which is awesome, on 32nd Street and Shea. I have a Harkins, rewards card, and then I have an Amazon gift card. You can consider these like tokens or rewards. So imagine them all blending together. This starts to look a lot like regular money. But the difference is, and what we've seen in the cryptocurrency market, is price appreciation. Very few people are buying a Starbucks rewards card expecting it to, increase in value by 86,000%. But that's what's happened with these, quote, tokens, or the coins. So this is all backup information that's sort of like, your homework. But I want to try something out on you. So look at this. Have you seen this before? Yeah. What is it? Is it a young woman who's beautiful? Or is it an old woman? Well, it's the same lines. But each of us can see something different in the same lines. Well, I assert that that's what's going on in this blockchain and cryptocurrency space. The Commodities Future Trading Commission sees the coins as commodities. The Security Exchange Commission sees them as securities. And yet it's the same thing. So after dealing with this for a while, I assert that blockchain is like the quantum mechanics of the social sciences. So in physics, we had classical mechanics, and in social sciences for, eons, we had centralized constructs. And then all of a sudden, relativity came along, which is analogous to the internet. And then quantum mechanics came along, which, in my view, is analogous to the blockchain. Now, there's not a lot of us spending a whole lot of brain cycles thinking about quantum mechanics, but I assure you it is permeating our lives. And that's the direction that I think blockchain and this, blockchain again is a poor term for this, but this decentralized construct that's going on. I assert that there are dynamics in place that are as profound and as mysterious as quantum mechanics. And if I could make one announcement. So on April the 28th, we'll be having our next Arizona Blockathon.us event, which is a day-long event for 50 developers and designers. You got to have some coding knowledge. By invitation to come together. We have talks in the mornings, break into teams, hack for a while, and then come and present. Marjan participated in the first one. We had 5 teams that came out of the day, 3 of which had working code. And it was awesome, but it's designed to be the start of like a prototype, a 6-month prototype that could be built out on a part-time basis. And it's designed to bring developers and companies together and have a little sandbox where you can experiment with blockchain and see what are the pros and the cons. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up at Desert Blockchain under Meetup, and there's some links on the desertblockchain.com. And it's a way to experiment with this and see what are the opportunity sets. How might this impact your business or your company?
Again, I'd like to wrap it up by thanking again Intel. They're one of our partners here at phoenixNAP, and they were kind enough to help us with this motion and the launch of this today. So thank you.